Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Town Council. I need to inform everyone present that this meeting is being filmed, and by your presence you're deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. Can I please request that when councillors and many members of the public are speaking, not to disclose any personal information of an individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach data protection rules. This is a formal Town Council meeting and will be held using the agenda as published. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to speak during public open sessions, but will not be permitted to speak at other times. And when you're not speaking, would you please mute your microphone? This will help to eliminate background noise. Thank you very much. There are no apologies for absence because all councillors are here. Are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. I have got one announcement to make because Mr. Tarrant and I did a webinar for the National Association of Local Councils at lunchtime. It was entitled Biggleswade, Strategic Planning for Larger Councils. And we had 50 delegates and went through a process of breakout groups and then plenary questions and answers after Peter and I had given introductions. And I was very pleased to receive an email from NELC this afternoon that said, thanks to yourself and Peter for expediting such a brilliant job at the event. I think the achievements current and imminent of Biggleswade Town Council in COVID circumstances are nothing short of phenomenal. I think that's a very nice email to receive. So maybe we've raised Biggleswade's profile just a little bit. I'm moving on. Have we got any members of the public? Do either of the members of the public wish to speak? I don't expect so, and nobody's showing any electronic hands. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Are members happy to defer the minutes of our meeting on the 12th of January to our regular meeting in February, please? Yes, okay, thank you very much. And now we come to the budget and precept, and it's for members to consider the draft budget papers and precept request figures for the 21-22 budget. So Mr. Tarrant, would you like to introduce your paper and your recommendation, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to focus on a fairly short introduction, if that's okay. I'm very conscious that this is a culmination to a number of previous conversations that have taken place within the council, and I know that members would have had the time to read the last paper that I wrote in some detail. So the fundamental challenge here, I think, is that we need to build a budget that can absorb medium to long-term growth. So we need to build a budget now that can fundamentally answer that question. There are two challenges in the room, effectively. One is talking about building up our general reserve, and two is the growth issue. Now, I think it divides into three areas now, and for me, the first area of challenge is effectively the corporate plan. We have a corporate plan for 2016, ending in 2020. One of the key areas that we'll be focusing on over the next few months is building that again. I've had a look at our old corporate plan. It certainly sets out some high-level key aspirations, but what it is not at the moment is a clear sense of direction, and it isn't a transactional level. So it's very difficult to try and encapsulate or draw from an old document what we might want to be doing over the next 5 years. And that's what I would stress to members. This is thinking about our budget today, but planning for the next 5 years at least. The second thing I would stress is we want to try to plan as best we can for what I would call not just unknown growth, and unknown growth sits within the corporate plan. I would also say about unspecific growth. So in previous papers, I've tried to allude to some sense of potential commitments that are evolving. Some things have yet to be defined, and some of these things which have yet to be defined and will be for members to make a judgment on whether they do or don't want to spend are potentially some issues around car park flooding, for example, the 7 projects that we have at Drove Road, potential future staffing related commitments, if a review is agreed, some relatively clear things around potential heating and spending on our building. And what I would stress is training our staff. So members will be aware of my perception around our current competencies and capabilities. I think that there will be a need for what I would call relatively significant expenditure connected to upskilling our staff. There is now, for the first time, a corporate training plan, which I'll be sharing with the personnel committee when we meet shortly. And equally, whilst I'm happy that we are now making even more progress connected to the neighbourhood plan, and that it's beginning to evolve, and we need to deliver it by October of this calendar year, new commitments are beginning to show themselves. And I want us to be in the position where, if these commitments can be more specific, that we can have a budget that enables us to make those difficult decisions. And lastly, what I would say is, I guess the question for us as a council is what are we about going forward? Now, as members will know, I'm still relatively new to Biggleswade, having been here for 22, 23 weeks now. My sense is that we need to modernize. We need to get even better than where we currently are. We strive to be the best, not for reputational reasons, but for the betterment of our community. Now, we can, as a town council, we can focus on what I will call BAU, using a bit of jargon. We can do the business as usual. We can do the things that we've always done in the past. Yep. Or we can make the investment now that enables us to make a fundamental difference to the lives of our residents and our community. This doesn't always mean money. It doesn't mean money. It means a collective support of you and officers. It's a collective support of our strategic partners. But in a lot of cases, when we're trying to invest and make a difference for people, and we want to make a tangible difference to people's lives, there will inevitably be an issue around making some form of investment. Now, the last thing I would say is that members are right to say that there can always be a yes or no decision to some of these issues. We do not need to agree to all of our growth. But I would stress, to be financially prudent, I think the right thing to do is to build a budget that is big enough that it allows some of our more difficult decisions to be made, conscious that we can afford it. So for us, I think it's about building that credibility. It's about building something that can absorb growth going forward. And the last thing I would mention to you, that within the report, there are 2 elements to be focusing on. Number 1 is a recommendation that I've made as the responsible financial officer that I believe to be financially prudent. The second issue is that there are a number of things that we need to do that are not of a financial nature, but we need to move forward at the same time as agreeing a precept. And they are summarized under other recommendations. So for me, I would commend the 9.5% to you, but at the same time, I would want those other things to be signed off by members and have your support into making those things happen. And that's a brief sense of setting the scene. I hope that's helpful, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I turn to Councillor Ramsey, please, as Chairman of F&GP?
Thank you. And thank you, Peter, for your extra explanations there. I've just prepared a few notes here because time goes along so quickly and COVID absorbs so much of our brain memory at the moment. And I know this has been a difficult and testing year, and that's not meant to be a pun, for everybody. But looking back as I have, the town population has expanded from in the region of 9,000 to now 20,000, and it will be 20,000 plus population over only the last 3 decades. And we are now among the top 4 towns in Bedfordshire. And I think we owe it to our residents to have a town council that is in fact fit for purpose for our growing town. We need to have the IT for a smooth running administrative department. And training needs to be carried out so that our staff can be kept up to date in how to use the IT and with modern systems that are now on the go, especially in other councils and in central beds. We need to have some more equipment for our public realm department. Used to be outside staff, didn't it? But of course, as the estates have grown and the development has grown, there's even more maintenance for them to do. We're doing our best in upgrading all the recreational equipment and making sure that is kept safe for the youngsters that want to use it. But we also needed some proper accommodation for the increased amount of equipment and to keep it dry and safe. And so we're not having to write it off down for devaluation or for being vandalised. There's much to do in the coming year. And of course, the best laid plans have been interrupted by COVID. The Orchard Centre has been closed and we have lost revenue, having already spent some money on improving the centre. The town car parks have been free to enable people to visit the shops that have remained open. So we are trying to keep them active in the market square. And there is work to do also on the horizon for the Rose Lane car park. You will have seen the flooding that's going on there. And we've also, because of COVID, had to supply staff and officers with the IT to work from home. Small things, but incremental and adding to the budget. And of course, we are going to have some ongoing costs for the neighbourhood plan, which is vital for our town, but it's not free, so we have to pay for that. Now, last year's precept made an increase of 38 pence per week for Band D. And me having listed off a shopping list of profit and loss and what we had got to pay out and what we've lost on income, you might think it's going to be more. But I am pleased to propose and support this increase of 9.5%, which will in fact amount to 28 pence per week on a Band D, which is 10 pence less of an increase than it was last year. So I do support the 9.5%. We need to have the money there to get these things done. Who knows what's going to happen with COVID in the future, but we need to be secure in our financial situation that we can take this council forward as the council deserves and the residents. Thank you.
So Councillor Ramsey has formally proposed the recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, I do. Right, councillors, comments, please. Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So this evening we make one of the most important decisions we make as town councillors. We have the power to decide how much council tax the 20,000 residents of Biggleswade will pay to the council this year. And unlike unitary authorities and district and county councils, we don't have a limit on how much we can increase the precept by. But with that power comes the responsibility for us to ensure that we're spending our residents' money wisely and that we only take what we need to provide the services that we provide. The last year has been financially difficult for everyone, but 90% of our income, all except about 150,000, comes from the precept and is effectively guaranteed. And at the end of this very difficult year, we're forecasting a deficit of just £27,500. So in the circumstances, I don't think we've really been adversely impacted at all as a council. We've identified the need for some of the transformational changes we need to make as a council, and the clerk and Councillor Ramsey have highlighted some of those. And so we've employed the new town clerk and chief executive. We've created 2 new assistant town clerk roles to drive the improvements. We've agreed to take out a lease on the new works depot, and we're soon going to be launching a new website to better serve our residents, as well as all of the things that Councillor Ramsey highlighted. Of
Councillor
Sorry.
Pullinger, we've lost you. I'll come back to Councillor Pullinger when he can rejoin us. Would anybody else wish to speak? Mr. Tarrant, you're coming in.
I'll only speak if Councillor Pullinger has dropped out now, but if he's not able to join us straight away, I would stress one thing which I didn't pick up earlier, and that is, and Derek, you might want to join us here briefly, is that the projected outturn. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pullinger's back.
I am back. I don't know what happened there.
I'll defer to Councillor Pullinger before I comment.
Can you just say where I was up to when I dropped out at your end? Somebody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I'm sorry, I can't
You were
help.
saying, I think
You
you were
were
saying something
saying-
about we have a great responsibility to.
That's as far as I
ready the
got.
checks or
No. You got to the point where you were basically saying that myself and Councillor Ramsey had given a sense about some of the growth-related activity.
Okay.
You
So
mentioned
we've
the website.
identified the need for a lot of transformational changes across the council to improve our operational efficiency and our services to residents. And so things like employing the new town clerk, we've created the new two new assistant town clerk roles.
Oh dear, Councillor Pullinger is struggling.
So, Madam Mayor, would you like us to comment while we're waiting?
I think you'd better.
Sorry, I don't know why that keeps dropping out. It's not anything I'm doing at my end.
Well, you said about creating 2 new assistant clerk roles.
Yeah. So so we've taken out the lease on the new works depot, and we've also launching a new website to better serve our residents. And all of these things, including all of the things that Councillor Ramsey mentioned, are included in the balanced budget that requires a precept increase of 3.48% per Band D property. And I would support that increase. And I'd also support all of the other recommendations that have been made by the town clerk. The difference between that amount and the proposed increase by 9.5% or the alternative of 6.45% is a matter of how we manage our reserves. The report says that we need to consider what the guidance in the practitioner's guide and the recommended level of our general reserve, which should be 3 months of net revenue expenditure for a council of our size. That ultimately seems sensible, and I think we should look at how we replenish our reserve shortfall to that level. And we're going some way to do that with the proposed transfer of £100,000 from the rolling capital reserve. But we should also look at the next paragraph of that very same document, which deals with the earmarked and other reserves. And it states that these must be held for genuine and intended purposes, and their level should be subject to regular review and justification, at least annually, and should be separately identified and enumerated. So other than the £94,000 worth of projects that have been budgeted to be delivered in 2021-22 and the proposed transfer to general reserves, the remaining £253,000 of that rolling capital reserve has not been itemised for future expenditure, nor have any capital risks been quantified to justify that level of reserve. And in fact, the most significant project that those reserves were generated for, which is to build a new depot, is no longer required because we are now going to lease a depot, and that's been built into the revenue budget. And so perhaps it might be a more prudent option to transfer more of that capital reserve into our general reserve to make up the shortfall. But we certainly shouldn't be unnecessarily building up our savings to the detriment of our residents' finances just because we're in a position where we can. So to summarise, I support the operational budget proposed and the necessity to increase the precept per Band D property by 3.48%. I acknowledge the fact that there's a deficit in the general reserve that ought to be addressed. However, I believe the absence of plans for spending the rolling capital reserve, there is no justification for holding total reserves in excess of £500,000. We need to set a vision and a strategic plan for the council and for the town of Biggleswade to know what we want to do and what we might want to spend in the future. But until we know what we want to do with the money we've already got sitting in our bank, we shouldn't be taking more money from our residents. Therefore, I am against the increase of 9.5%.
Thank you, Councillor Pullinger. Mr. Tarrant.
Just a point of clarification, if I can. Firstly, and Derek might want to join me on this conversation, the projected outturn information that we have at the moment is as of today. Derek, would you want to just drop off your and be able to speak a moment? Can you take it off pause? Yep. So
Yes.
at the moment, this is an indicative figure, which is potentially open to change. And we won't know what it's like until we close down the accounts. So there are some matters that are still to be decided that will impact on this figure. So I would stress that it's indicative at the moment. Do you want to add anything to that, Derek, before I pass over some other comments?
I would say, if anything, that our projected deficit for this year is likely to get worse rather than better. When we made our basic assumptions, we were looking at an ending of lockdown in September, October, November, and we all know we've had one reimposed since then. Next year's budget assumes that we are more or less back to normal, that our income streams are more or less back to normal, that our cost base is almost back to normal. I think, if anything, that is possibly an optimistic view, and therefore I think we're still going to struggle to meet our actual budget next year without some further hit on our resources.
Okay. Can I point out two other things to members? Number one, we'd go back to what I was talking about before. Yes, we do have a corporate plan. No, we don't have a new plan. And obviously today we do not know what fundamentally we are seeking to achieve for the next 5 years. So there is most definitely a gap to fill there in the sense of understanding and intelligence and commitments. So we wait for that, we wait for this development. And the second thing to be conscious of is certainly Councillor Pullinger is right to say that some of our growth is indicated in the budget. However, there is some unspecific growth that is not allocated in the budget because we do not know what the figures are. And I can highlight that to members, but these are some significant figures that we just can't quantify at the moment. But anyway, thank you very much.
Colleagues, who else would like to speak? Councillor Strawn, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have great sympathy with Councillor Pullinger's comments re the rolling capital reserve, because that was my initial thoughts when I saw the budget, and I felt that we should probably be moving more of that to the general reserve for many of the reasons that Councillor Pullinger has said. However, I have a number of concerns over our finances, and I think something we all have to recognise is that the last year has been absolutely unique in the history of this country in terms of finance and council administration. It's never happened before like this. I doubt whether even the world wars have had an effect like this. It has been absolutely devastating to the country, and we're not out of the woods yet. And I look at the income that's been projected for the current year, and I have concerns that we will actually achieve what we are still projecting. And I fear this is going to run on into the next financial year from other sources. I think our only source of income that we can rely on is the precept. Now, I would love to support Councillor Pullinger's proposal for the 3.48%. For the sake of the community as a whole, and particularly those who are struggling, or those who are really struggling may well get council tax relief. But we have employed a new town clerk and, as it says on the recommendation, responsible financial officer, who has done an incredible amount of work in a very short time in reviewing and looking at the whole practices and looking to bring the town council up to date so that we can provide the best services possible for the town. And much as I don't want to increase the council tax by the recommendation of 9.5%, I will be supporting that recommendation unless I hear very good reason to the contrary, because I think there are so many unknown factors that I can see that our income won't be as high necessarily as we would hope next year and has been projected. And equally, I can see that our expenditure may become higher for reasons that have been enumerated earlier. We've employed the town clerk. He's made a very clear recommendation. Our financial, the recommendation of our accountant, Mr. Kemp, is that we could only move the 100,000 from the rolling capital fund. And on that basis, I believe that we as a council should place our faith in our town clerk and responsible financial officer and support his recommendation. Much as though it's going to be uncomfortable for, I think, every one of us to increase the council tax precept by that amount, I think that this is 1 year where we've got to bite the bullet and take that action. And what we will need to do is look to really work very hard in all our committees and with the town clerk over the next 12 months to produce a budget for and a precept request for the year 2022-23, which will actually alleviate some of the costs. But I believe because of all the uncertainties, all the financial pressures and all the personal pressures that are on everyone at the moment, that much as it would be desirable to support Councillor Pullinger, I'm going to support the town clerk's recommendation. That's what we've employed him for. And if you've forgiven an expression, if we employ a dog, why do the barking?
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. I'm not going to make the remark that comes immediately to mind, but could I ask Mr. Tarrant to come back in, please? And then Councillor Ramsey and Councillor Knight.
Thank you.
All I was going to briefly say, Madam Mayor, was that whatever decision members make this evening after I'm sure a very detailed and thoughtful debate, I think it's absolutely critical that we message that properly to our residents. So this is not about percentages, although the percentage figure is highlighted there. It's about properly messaging to our residents the reasons for whatever decision that you make, and having some very, very clear comms, as I call it. So I'd be very happy to take that on board and to be as clear and transparent to our residents as possible so that they properly understand the reasons behind any decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey, then Councillor Knight.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Strawn has already alluded to what might happen next year, and I think probably Derek Kemp might be able to confirm what I'm saying, but there are very strong rumours because unitary authorities and county authorities have been capped, which is one of the reasons the central bed's main one, I think, is something like 1.95%, not including the 4% extra that they're allowed to add. It could well be that by this time next year, we will be told that all authorities will be capped at 2% or 3%. And that would leave us in a very parlous position. I know you think we've got to account for every single penny in the reserves, but it seems to me that we need to be a little bit forward looking. And even if they don't put a cap on us next year, we should probably still be able to reduce the precept. But I do ask you to bear in mind that next year we might not have the choice and we might be obliged to take something like 1.5%, as they tried to do with central beds. Have you heard anything about that, Derek?
The last I've heard is that the official word from both the Treasury and MHCLG is that they are keeping the question of capping town and parish councils under review. They have no immediate plans to do so, but never say never.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Knight. You're muted, Councillor Knight.
Thank you for drawing that to my attention. Firstly, my thanks to the clerk and his team for preparing the draft budget. My primary concern is delivering value for money for Biggleswade's residents. And my opening position, and we've obviously been on a journey over the last few weeks with this draft budget, is that in this most difficult of years when so many families are struggling financially, we should be looking to freeze council tax. And I remind colleagues that the precept was increased by over 12% last year. As a Conservative, yes, I want excellent public services, but I also believe we must keep tax low. However, during the process of reviewing the budget, I've come to recognise that we must increase the operating budget by about 4.5%. And thus, I have come to reluctantly accept that in addition to the extra 1% we essentially get for free from new homes, we need to raise the precept by 3.5%. This is my preferred precept increase, and it is clear, as Councillor Pullinger explained, that 3.5% will fully and adequately fund all of our services for the next year. As has been mentioned, our combined capital and general reserves already exceed £500,000, and in this year of lockdowns, we are forecast to use around £27,000 from general reserves. In part, this is because we're in the very fortunate position that 90% of our revenue is guaranteed. And this is evidence that we can manage uninsurable risks without larger reserves. What could be worse than this year? I hope nothing. In light of our decision to lease rather than buy, we no longer need to build a new depot. We have very few firm capital expenditure plans. And I do not support increasing the tax burden on residents solely to increase our reserves when we do not have a comprehensive capital investment strategy. I suggest instead, as has been mentioned, we consider transferring from capital to general reserves if the consensus is that the general reserves should be higher. So I firmly believe that 3.5% would be the correct rise, and I really want to minimise the burden on families. While the annual per household figure may appear quite small, as I think Councillor Ramsey mentioned, all of these inflationary pressures add up at a time when many households' incomes are frozen or in decline. And I also have the utmost faith that our new clerk will find additional savings and revenues within the period covered by this budget. Quite frankly, our new clerk's only really just managed to start to get his teeth into some of these matters. So that's my preference. However, given the clear, strong opinions on different sides of the room, having thought about this, I would be willing to lend my support for an amendment or revised proposal for 6.5% in an effort to prevent a rise of 9.5% that I would find wholly unacceptable. I'm willing to compromise, and I really hope that other members will find it in themselves to do the same. We have been presented with 3 options, and I think it's valid that we consider all of them and perhaps choose the one in the middle. Finally, given the very strong range of views in the room tonight, I would like to ask that all votes on this agenda item be recorded votes, so that those members voting for and against are shown in the minutes per standing order number 10, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. That's noted. Councillor North, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would just like to make 2 comments. Firstly is to endorse and support the comments made by Councillor Strawn about the uncertainty we are facing and the unprecedented conditions in which we are carrying on our business at the present time. And secondly, I would like to say, I think anybody who doesn't, I think we need to have faith and trust in the person we have appointed as Chief Executive and Town Clerk, and he has produced a recommendation for a budget. Unless there is a very good reason, I think we should support it. And yes, of course, we're all concerned about the pressure on family budgets and the need to ensure we're not over increasing the taxes on people. But I'm sure these are considerations that have been in the Town Clerk and our advisor Derek Kemp's minds already as they've prepared this plan and these intentions. So I shall support the proposal from the Chief Executive.
Thank you. Who else? Councillor Foster? Frank Foster?
Thank you. As other people, thank you very much, Town Clerk, for an excellent report. I would be supporting option 3 and an increase of 9.5%.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thomas?
Thank you. I would support the same position as Councillor Knight. I haven't heard any reason why we should be spending more money this year. We've had an unprecedented year and it was unexpected. and we've managed to get through that. So I don't see any point in adding to the burden on the people of Biggleswade when they probably haven't got any money to actually make it 9% when we asked for 12% last year. Also, I would compromise, as Councillor Knight says, on 6% if I had to. But I think the lowest possible number is the only one we should be going for. We're not here to sort of save money and just in case something happens. I think we've got enough money, as Councillor Robert Pullinger said, and I think we can do well on that. If the new clerk is, as he's already said, can do a lot of work without some of the extra money, I think we should do as much as we can without overspending. So I would go for, I would prefer 3, I would prefer nothing, but I would prefer 3.48%, or I would happily go for the 6.5 if there's no consensus.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Good evening. Just as Councillor Thomas said, I want to 100% support our leader of the council, and I don't see it that voting for the lower amount is not doing that. There's logical arguments financially. The only logical arguments presented, everything else is based on speculation about what could happen. Having a reserve of 5% is good practice. Our residents know what good practice is. They have their reserves, and a small minority have eaten into them big style. As leaders, I think we should be using some of our reserve in order to support the clerk 100%. So my vote would be, I say, for the lower, but like Councillor Thomas, having heard the arguments tonight, I would settle for the middle one.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? I'm not getting anybody showing, so we've been asked for a recorded vote. So I'll move to the vote on 9.5% for the precept for 21-22. I'm just making a note. So I'll go through the councillors alphabetically. And will you please say for, against or abstain? For 9.5%, against or abstaining. So I start with Councillor Alban, please.
I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Bond. Can't hear you, Councillor Bond.
For.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Grant Fage.
Abstain.
Councillor Leslie Fage.
For.
Councillor Frank Foster.
My apologies, for. I was muted.
Councillor Mark Foster.
Against.
Councillor Mark Knight.
Against.
Councillor North.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pullinger.
Against.
Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Ramsey, you're on mute. You're on mute.
No good shouting then. For, thank you.
Myself, I'm for. Councillor Strawn.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Woodhead.
Against.
Thank you. That's 6 against, 1 abstention, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for. So 8 for, 6 against and 1 abstention. So the precept for 21-22 will be 9.5%. We have the other recommendations from the clerk, the transformation programme, the efficiency and cost reduction review, additional revenue streams, performance indicators, staff salary review, residents messaging. Is council happy to take them as a block, or do we want to vote individually on those? Take them as a block. Can you just show if you're happy? Yeah, okay, thank you. So can I have a proposal and a seconder, please? Councillor Frank Foster. And Councillor Strong, that's fine.
Okay.
Did you wish to speak, Councillor Foster?
No, I just I'll propose it.
Okay, and Councillor Strawn to second. So I'm assuming this is a vote by show of hands. Nobody's asked for a recorded vote on this. So can you please show if you're in favour of accepting the other recommendations from the town clerk, please? Can you show? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Wait a minute. Right, well, we don't have any further items on the agenda. We have no exempt items. But before we finish, can I just apologise to Derek Kemp for not welcoming him to the meeting and to say thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Derek.
No apology necessary, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any other business. So thank you very much, colleagues, and good night to everybody. Thank you. Good night.